Hey everyone, these are my these are my humans. Woo. On February 8th, 1965, President Lyndon Johnson addressed Congress and advocated for the conservation of America's public lands and their natural resources. In response to increasing pressure from private interests to open these places for their own exploitation, he proclaimed, "Once our natural splendor is destroyed, it can never be recaptured. And once man can no longer walk with beauty or wonder at nature, his spirit will wither and his sustenance be wasted." He knew what was at stake, that he had to protect these places for the betterment of all future Americans. But despite the efforts of Johnson and other conservationists, these private interests have continued to increase pressure on politicians for decades. And in recent months, a series of alarming developments have laid bare plans to drastically increase the amount of land leased to these nefarious players, mostly oil and gas corporations who wish to profit from the exploitation of America's resources, resources that belong to every American. These natural wonders that have become a cornerstone of American identity have never faced such a threat from within. So I followed the situation extensively, not only as someone who frequently recreates outdoors in federally managed lands, but as an aspiring ecologist hoping to help conserve these places in the future. So today I'm here to provide you with more information about the impending exploitation of our public lands and why it's so important that we all do our part to make sure that these places are preserved for the benefit of future generations. I'll discuss why these lands are worth protecting, what's threatening them, and why, and the challenges faced in their conservation. Finally, I'll highlight ways that common citizens can support the cause. So, as I mentioned, America's public lands and natural resources are under threat of greedy and short sighted exploitation sold out by those charged with stewarding them for future generations. They've been hit with a sort of double punch in recent months. Firstly, according to the National Parks Conservation Association, funding for the National Park Service in 2025 was slashed by the House of Representatives by over $210 million, despite surging visitation numbers. This will leave thousands fewer park rangers to help ensure visitor safety and fewer resources to help protect our beloved natural and cultural sites. A statement from Kristen Brengel, VP of Government Affairs for the MPCA, reads, "Funding cuts at this scale would devastate the national park system at a time when so many parks are understaffed. With the added challenges of managing record visitation and protecting our parks' cultural and natural resources from increasingly worsening climate change impacts, this bill significantly hinders the agency rather than address these critical issues." And if that weren't bad enough, a string of executive orders from President Trump will wreak additional havoc. The Unleashing American Energy order proclaims a new federal desire to lease as much public land as possible to oil and gas corporations for resource extraction, further enriching these companies while polluting and exploiting our most beloved landscapes and fragile ecosystems without being accountable for the damage they cause. Another order froze all wind farm leases, signaling this administration's desire to abandon green technologies, setting back the fight against climate change and adding another wrinkle to the threat facing these lands. And now, the national park system is considered the crown jewel of America. So, according to the National Park Service, visitation at its sites reached over 325 million in 2023. They protect world-renowned landscapes, wildlife habitat, and cultural sites, many of which are completely unique on Earth. These places have been the scenes of lifelong memories made not just for millions of Americans, but from visitors around the globe. And additionally, they are the lifeblood economic drivers of their communities. These sites are immensely significant in American culture, and their stewardship has been taken seriously by our government for decades. So, what caused this extreme shift? Before we can discuss solutions, it's important to try to understand what's driving these decisions. So, the truth is that no one knows all of the factors that continue to drive and motivate those in power. But one factor that can be provably linked, and is probably the most obvious and relevant, is the almighty dollar. Money in politics has plagued the American political system for generations. Politicians across the country continue to act against the best interests of their constituents to enrich themselves and their friends, and obviously the office of president is not immune to this. According to a report by the New York Times, President Trump hosted big oil and gas executives at Mar-a-Lago, where he asked for $1 billion in campaign donations in return for promises that he would roll back environmental regulations and open new lease opportunities for extraction on publicly controlled lands. Special interests have been testing the bounds of environmental protections with increasing ferocity in every arena in America. According to a report from the Center for American Progress, no corner of the country is safe from these special interest groups, from leasing land to be stripped clean of raw materials or being sold off to developers who wish to turn America's wondrous landscapes into exclusive playgrounds for the wealthy. These groups are working tirelessly towards their goals. Just last year, for example, lawmakers in Utah, a state whose lands are majority controlled by the federal government, attempted to sue the Biden administration in an attempt to seize control of these lands in order to lease resource extractors. So as you can see here, the areas in red are not currently designated as a national park, national monument, national forest. This is just controlled by the Bureau of Land Management, and the state of Utah considers that inefficient use of their land, essentially. So they're suing the federal government for control of these lands, that they can lease them to private developers, resource extractors, oil and gas companies, etc. So, and with so much of the government working on this new agenda, it may seem hopeless for common citizens to make a difference. But with stakes this high, we simply cannot afford to remain idle. The best power we have is while working together, each of us doing our small part to make a big difference. There are a few ways we can help support the solution. One way is by writing your local representative or even the Trump administration itself. No matter your political affiliation, voicing your concerns to those in power can be an effective tool to affect their decisions. But it requires large numbers of voters to make their will heard, enough that if they were to possibly band together come election time, it could have negative consequences for the incumbents if they fail to consider the position of the voters. Ask them to end new fossil fuel leasing and put greater emphasis on protecting our public lands from exploitation at the hands of private interests in the future. Another way is by supporting organizations that have the knowledge, funding, and coordination to effect real change. One organization that has been working to protect public lands against these special interests is Earth Justice. Earth Justice pursues lawsuits against the government when new land leases cause negative externalities on the surrounding communities and ecosystems. They push for accountability and advocate for America's most vulnerable ecosystems to remain off limits for resource extraction and development. Now, they'll certainly have their work cut out for them in the coming years, but a small donation can go a long way into helping these types of organizations keep up the fight. So it's my sincere hope that you have all not only learned something about the emerging threats facing our public lands, but that I've instilled a desire and the knowledge to do your small part in the larger battle to save them. We discussed the threats from their own stewards, no less, facing America's federally managed lands and why they are worth protecting. We examined possible motives for these new turns in policy, and we have clear actions that we can take to make a small difference. The protection of America's world-renowned landscapes, wildlife, and cultural sites is one of the least polarizing topics in American politics today. The memories made at these places are unifying aspects of the American experience, one of the few things that can still bring us together. It is in the interest of all of us to put differences aside and advocate for the protection of these amazing lands so that future generations may experience these incredible places and the power they hold to unite us, even in times of great division. Thank you.